many reasons that will become apparent. It is an honor to welcome to Penn, and a very special honor to welcome to Penn, Keorapetse Kgositsile, the poet laureate of South Africa. All of us gathered here participate in a very special reading and lecture tour that he is doing in the United States. And we are grateful to Jeffrey Allen, acclaimed novelist in his own right, at the New School for bringing Penn into the loop on this tour. We all owe the Kelly Writers House, its director, Alphil Reese, and staff, especially Jessica Lowenthal, who was on board from the very beginning of the conversations about a possible reading here, the Center for Africana Studies, its director, Camille Charles, and staff, and especially Gail Garrison and Michelle Houston for taking the lead in handling many of the details. And the English department, its chair, Nancy Bentley, and administrative staff for immediate and enthusiastic support. I can't emphasize that too much. So this is then the honor that we are all participating in. It is a joy, it is a blessing, what an occasion, right? The reading and lecture tour is a kind of homecoming, we can call it, for the poet laureate, because as he moves through these various stops and through these various encounters with multifaceted and various audiences, he is also renewing friendships and reading with poets and writers and even educators who knew him during his years of exile in the United States from 1962 to 1975, so a very long period by some standards. And of course, it was here in the US that he published the 3 books of poetry in succession, Spirits Unchained, 1969, For Melba, 1970, and My Name is Afrika, 1971, that established his place among the foremost, most important, most impressive, and significant voices of the emergent Black arts movement. And that forever will link him as a kind of homeboy-style personage to his family of writers of African descent in the US. So a very warm welcome we here extend as well as a part of this very special tour. So since 2007, what we have is a very special kind of person going to a different place in his career and life. Since then, what we have is our honored poet becoming the poet laureate, the National South African Poet Laureate, with 10 outstanding volumes, moving and award-winning poetry volumes, including When the Clouds Clear, published in Johannesburg in 1990 and marking his initial return to South Africa. His journey, though, to the office of Poet Laureate and to a position as advisor to the South African Minister of Arts and as respected mentor to a number of young South African writers and poets, had multiple routes and stops in other African nations once he left the US in 1979, but which I will not try to recount here, since you've all been waiting to hear him speak, and we're getting started just at this moment, though all of those stops contribute to the poetry he has created and the politics he has espoused. So, born in Johannesburg, Kgositsile, I'm always sort of mixing up the vowels, Kgositsile, grew up under apartheid and early learned what being Black meant in that society. But unlike many, he also discovered a voice and a language to articulate and validate his Blackness, its value, and its inalienability, even under the most oppressive conditions. As a member of the African National Congress, he was a vocal political agent for change. His reading of Richard Wright helped him find a way to meld English with both his activist passions and his mother tongue. And the combination contributed to igniting his unique power in words, the spoken word and the written word. Obviously, a South Africa of apartheid could not accommodate his passion and power in words and ideas, though he became influential in the ANC and its struggle. By 1961, he was forced to begin his odyssey out of South Africa, but carrying with him the words that he had come to love, to Dar es Salaam, and eventually to the US, and to Pennsylvania's own Lincoln University, which was Langston Hughes's alma mater, so perhaps in some ways quite fitting. And on then to a series of schools, including Columbia in New York, which became his larger universe in its music, art, and theater scenes. The inflection in his poetry from the end of the 1960s into the early 70s was not merely his absorbing of Black literature, but also of jazz, blues, and Black music more generally. And yes, the connection that we all know to the last poets. We can hear echoes of the music in his poems of every era, and we can read the names of those musicians he honored in his poems, Nina, Coltrane, Marvin, and more. But the significance that we must mark was his linking Black people across national boundaries, the African diaspora, in the music and the language, duplicating the music in multiple creative forms. He saw Africa in Black American identity and brought Africa to that identity, and always with a purpose. As he put it, in a situation of oppression, there are no choices beyond didactic writing. Either you are a tool of oppression or an instrument of liberation. Or, as he wrote in The Present is a Dangerous Place to Live, there are no sanctuaries except purposeful action. But that stark expression that we hear in his prose works and his poetry, that stark kind of expression flows together in his writings to do what? To push back against resistance and to pull up possibility. Some will mention mainly his politics, but he is a true wordsmith, a consummate artist, a poet in control of the rhythms, nuances, and play of language, of the tension between the lyrical and the hard sound and meaning, the tough, hard sound and tough, hard meaning that stop one's breath, stop one short, and throw the familiar into a harsh cocoon of hope and longing, where desire is almost realized in the possibilities inside language and through a line of hope, belief, and love, though not charity in that classical sense, but knowledge of the body, the sweat, the flesh, the funk, the material willing to be exposed and open when he writes, where even skin disappears. And always the music and the rhythm and the wisdom and the knowledge of culture. What we have seen him do is to write and to continue to write, to be a creative moving force between poetry and performance, between creative and critical writing, between teaching and reading, and always to alert us to the reality of living Black in a wide social world. His remarkable, remarkable achievement is that he has written some of the most memorable lines and the most quotable lines, and yes, even lyrical lines from the Black Arts movement, but that his poetry has not ended there. If I Could Sing 2002 and This Way I Salute You 2004 show his power, as always, is tempered by the mellow glow of an unmistakable voice, which we will now have the pleasure of hearing. But I have to end this introduction with the personal, which is, as always, political, and with memory beckoning from the future. his words. In the 1970s, when I was a graduate student in Boston working for the Institute for Services to Education and the 13 College program, one of my mentors and the program director, Conrad Snowden, introduced me to Willie Kgositsile, who, with Larry Neal, A.B. Spellman, before he went to the National Endowment for the Arts, and a number of African American and American writers and artists were brought into our program because its objective was to change curricular materials to acknowledge and incorporate the world of letters and learning post-1960s. It was Black-centered and Afro-centered in all of the best ways of teaching as a part of the mission of radical thinkers and doers. I mention this by way of concluding this introduction to our guest of honor because one of the hallmark aspects of his career has been his investment in teaching, in education, in learning as a process and a practice. But I have to say that all of the young radicals on our staff wanted to be as cool and as smooth as Willie, as brilliantly gifted and dazzlingly talented, as at ease between worlds, between poetry and politics, between music and performance of the spoken word, as necessary forms of activism and engagement. My friend, the writer Austin Clarke, has an evocative title I've always wanted to use. When he was young and free, and he used to wear silks. So I would like to paraphrase in honor of our guest of honor and to represent what Willie was to me and the rest of us at ISE in celebration of the memory of work and to praise the present achievement and to dream the future struggle always in progress. When we were young and radical and we used to wear dashikis. Please welcome.
I don't know if I can live up to that. But what is most dangerous about it is that I might believe it myself. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. I'll start with the young, since they represent the future that has just been referred to. This poem is called Rejoice. It's dedicated to my youngest son, Tebe. Rejoice, says Tebe Neruda of the vibrant smile, the eye so curious it is reluctant to shut the world out, even in sleep. I'm the dream keeper, he says, the spontaneous song and the dance pulsating with the force of my people's ethos. Watch me and rejoice. Our sister Betty Carter, repository of our memory, whose mouth is free of all untruth, who plays her voice as a horn, says, you can do anything you want to do if you know what to do. I am witness and celebrant here. I do everything I want to do because I know what to do. I'm the dream keeper, I say, the mouth that tells no lie. I'm not a man. I'm a boy, beneficiary of the fruit harvested from my people's memory. Watch me and rejoice. Poet, leave him. Leave him alone, you have praised him. You have praised him without knowing his name. His name is Mouth That Tells No Lie. Okay. Memorial. Though we know life is no long joy, someone enters your life and stays there. You learn something about desire and learn to live here. What is revealed is subtle. Though quiet, it is equally intense. A flame, not red but blue, its contours vividly simplified and softer. Once here, you seldom want to leave. When you stumble upon stillnesses and such curious spaces without warning, you think you miss your old place, where memories stayed within immediate reach. You now have difficulty finding memories. It is perhaps the lack of history, yet peeking at you are images of beginnings that have become soft remembrances you turn over and over, wondering at their comfort. Recollections spring up and advance or retreat into and out of memory. You think you have finally started on a decisive journey away from the Afrika of colonial design, along with that of the narcissistic poets. You pause here in search of direction. If your destination remains elusive, how do you propose to know what direction to take? Though you remain convinced that to be alive, you must have somewhere to go, your destination remains elusive. Habits of movement rattle and peep through the stillnesses surrounding your memory as they ambush what might have been clarity of in or foresight or thought. But did you not only yesterday say where to go is what to do? Dizzy says, it's taken all my life to learn what not to play. How long will it take you to learn what not to say? Change pace a little bit. For Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. For the sound we revere, we dub you art as continuum, as spirit, as sound of depth here to stay. In my young years, I heard you bobbing and weaving messages I could only walk to where wood mates with skin. I would have dubbed you Godhead, but your sound rolled and peeled. I'm the drumhead, even though Blue Note don't care nothing but prophet. How you sound is who you are, where your ear leans, moaning and bobbing from the amen corner of chicken and dumpling, memories and places. In my young years, I would have dubbed you something strange as God of opiate heaven, of brutal contact, of Bible and rifle memories, but the drumhead rolled my name. How you sound is who you are, like drum sound backing back to root, roosting at the meeting place, the time that has always been here. Even here, where wood mates with skin on wax to make memory to place us, even in this hideous place, pounding the sounds of who we are, even in this place of strange and brutal design. Kate. It starts with a quotation from a poem by J. Wright, an African-American poet I think should be much more well-known and much more celebrated than he is. And death is the reason to begin again without letting go. J. Wright. About longing and lament of a night when a lamp-hearted moon leaks through this humid air, and you on the dressing table in little sister's room, little sister who, like you, neither knows nor remembers any glamour of youth or exile, and your eye, piercing, follows every move we make like an eternal sentinel. Your death was an end of death, and here we begin again. My sister, forgive us our demand for the improbable, our longing for your presence here right now, though what happened on that treacherous road and day we know. Forgive us, for right now it is not you, but us, shrouded in gloom. My sister, I could not come to see what remained of you. Even if I had dared, I couldn't whiskey my way out of your eye any more than I could jump out of my skin. Even on the 6th day after that treacherous Saturday that whisked you away from us, I could not come to see what remained of you. Your specter patrols my restless moments when I know I should be slitting fascist throats or poeting your determined purpose, but I bounce to impotence like a check foreign to you in your fashioning our future. I could not even whiskey my way out of your eye any more than I could jump out of my skin. Not that it would have made a difference had your hasty death on the Morogoro Road been foretold. That was what you had to do, clearly, as a philosophical choice. A meeting, though at most of them there is not much more than platitude or pretension. Clothes for the children, though to this day most remain as naked as their young souls. So now you are gone. You had to take a final road not chosen by you. And finally, I came and I looked and I was chilled to numbness. A mouth full of cotton wool where your weighted smile used to be. Body all shrouded and deathly still. No missile from your tongue or eye which always demanded what and why. Later, when I wished for rain to come smother my impotent tears, Baba said, only the pillow knows the tears of a man. Now, like my sister's embrace across the treacherous waters and centuries, I want to put my mouth on paper. The poet in me wants to carve a monument in song, a simple song stronger than any granite wall, a song that says, Kate Malale is the people. But the poem won't come. For David Rubadiri. David Rubadiri is a Malawian poet who, when Malawi became independent in the 60s, was made the first Malawi ambassador to the United Nations. But soon after that, Kamuzu Banda, the then president and all-round, he occupied all the cabinet posts, and the all-round, I don't know, super king of Malawi, decided to establish trade relations with Pretoria, with apartheid South Africa. So Rubadiri quit and said he would never work for any government that had any relations with apartheid South Africa. And of course, every Malawian on this planet was given Banda's blessing to, I don't know, chop up Rubadiri, feed him to crocodiles if they were near a river that was infested with crocodiles, or do whatever they wanted to do with him. Every fellow is a foreign country, says my sister, who is an area of mellow feeling and catharsis, who can rage and rave like the blues, or like Laguma's preacher man across vastnesses of land and water and memory, who knows the world don't belong to General Motors. The world don't belong to Chase Manhattan. The world don't belong to Coca-Cola, no matter how cool the pause that refreshes. Now, though I am neither scientist nor philosopher, I know there is something of you in Rubadiri of the slow smile, which can explode into folds of laughter, or the tears you can feel in the depths of his heart. Like you, Rubadiri is a foreign fellow. He is you. Rubadiri can ask a diplomat who talks, can you make a baby smile? Rubadiri can ask any man, do you know how it feels to be pregnant? Of a Sunday morning straight from service, where he has been scratching his jaw sedately, Rubadiri can ask in a tone juvenile mischief would envy. You know, Buti, they talk as if sugar daddies are a thing of now. But Joseph, the father of Jesus, was he not the original sugar daddy? Epitaph for Ken Temba. Ken Temba was an extremely gifted South African writer, short story writer, and genius of a journalist who died in exile in Swaziland. He was, well, the generation, just the literary generation just before mine. Starts with a little quotation from a poem by Libet Sandy Bethune from Jamaica. About mourning, many kinds of pictures, all incomplete, all the unfinished tapestry at the bottom of your old trunk. We think of you as an institution demolished by bulldozers of colonial design. We say what does not finish is ominous, so forever, like exile, is an ominous load to carry even for one cynical as you, though we can still not talk of you as dead. My boy, for all we know, you willed your death with perverse precision, though you did not invent the spirits that gnawed at your liver with the determination of termites, or the law and order which has killed the mystic dreamer in me. We could have dubbed you fish, but you did not swim in water. We dubbed you can as container and mimicked your decay, hoping to give birth to our life. Can, child of my mother, all of you is not involved in this evil business, death, nor all of us in life. Letter to Skwenda. Skwenda is a Bogazian, is a fantastic painter and sculptor from Ethiopia. Skwenda also died in exile in this country, was teaching at Howard. Comrade and kind brother, you know the scream of women against the brutal tearing of skin and soul. You know blisters deeper than flesh or any god. So, shall I put it this way? Your path is no stranger to mine. Go home like your memories. Remember what this Chinese sister or brother said a long time ago? That the birds of worry and care fly over your head, this you cannot change. But that they build nests in your hair, this you can prevent. For Zeke and Dennis. Zeke is Eskiam Patlele and Dennis Brutus, both of whom lived here in this country a long time, taught and wrote, and now both are dead. But child of the crisis, son of sirens, knuckles, and boots. Tongues pronounce judgment, yes, and so do guns and grenades. Armed peace is an act of love, we now know. We now know somewhere a mother will rejoice. These voices gather like rain clouds over the land we must reclaim. Under any sky, they gather as they whisper in your eye or where the smile could have been. Somewhere, a mother must rejoice. Wanderer with embers on your tongue, these voices gather to tame or fuel the furnace in your eye on the long road that will nourish soul and purpose with a simple, this land is mine. Because we now know, to know our sorrow is to know our joy. For Johnny Jani, damn it, too many people are dead here. Johnny Jani was a bass player in South Africa who also in exile. He played, if I give you an idea of the caliber of musician he might be, played with people like Archie Shep, Abdullah Ibrahim, Don Cherry, and I could go on and on. Perhaps appropriately, he died on stage playing in Germany for Johnny Jani. When I swim in my music, a hammerton of colors becomes an area of feeling where a rainbow of feathers peoples all space dancing in my heart. Here, I do not even know what flowers pop out of my eye. I move without even touching air. Johnny, you take us out there where we gasp silently amidst a bombardment of sound in the spell of the witch doctor's son, where I cannot even ponder how a witch and a doctor paradox could be one entity. Your bass, Johnny, pins nothing down. Your bass rides on wave or height or rock or depth or crevice of sound to bathe us in music, and we are moved where we cannot even hear ourselves gasp. Cassandra Wilson will sing. Let me sense the chaos. I will respond with a song. Why else was I born, says Jimmy of the purple haze, through Kalamu ya Salam. Now look at those eyes. Look at her arms. Follow her little finger. I wonder what Jean Tuma, who could see the Georgia pike growing out of a goat path in Africa, would say about Cassandra Wilson tonight. Perhaps Cassandra does not even sing. Here, of course, a voice there is, possessed by music like the rest of her. Her whole body is song. Her whole body has sensed the chaos. I say, look at those eyes. Look at her arms. Follow her little finger and understand perhaps why you were born with ears. Okay. Maybe I'll just wind up with two more. History does not move in a linear manner like any straight line. So, even in the new South Africa, there are some things that we cannot be proud of. Like, for instance, what the media is referred to as xenophobic violence. There might be a little poem or verse somewhere in this, but it's just okay. No serenity here. An omelette cannot be unscrambled. Not even the one prepared in the crucible of 19th century sordid European design. When Europe cut up this continent into little pockets of its imperialist want and greed, it was not for aesthetic reasons, nor was it in the service of any African interest, intent, or purpose. When, then, did the brutality of imperialist appetite and aggression evolve into something of such ominous value to us that we torture, mutilate, butcher in ways hideous beyond the imagination, rape women, men, even children and infants for having woken up on what we now claim with perverse possessiveness and territorial chauvinism to be our side of the boundary that until only yesterday arrogantly defined where a piece of one European property ended and another began. In my language, there is no word for citizen, which is an ingredient of that 19th century omelette. That word came to us as part of the package that contained the Bible and the rifle. But moagi is there, and it has nothing to do with any border or boundary you may or may not have crossed before waking up on the piece of earth where you currently live. Poem, I know you are reluctant to sing when there is no joy in your heart, but I have wondered all these years why you did not or could not give answer when Langston Hughes, who wondered as he wondered, asked, what happens to a dream deferred? I wonder now why we are somewhere we did not aim to be. Like my sister, who could report from anywhere people live, I fear the end of peace. And I wonder if that is perhaps why our memories of struggle refuse to be erased. Our memories of struggle refuse to die. We are not strangers to the end of peace here. We have known women widowed without any corpses of husbands because the road to the mines, like the road to any war, is long and littered with casualties, even those who still walk and talk. When Nathalie, whose young eyes know things, says there is nothing left after wars, only other wars, wake up, whether you are witness or executioner, the victim whose humanity you can never erase, knows with clarity more solid than granite that no matter which side you are on any day or night, an injury to one remains an injury to all. Somewhere on this continent, the voice of the ancients warns that those who shit on the road will meet flies on their way back. So, perhaps you should shudder under the weight of nightmares when you consider what thoughts might enter the hearts of our neighbors, what frightened or frightening memories might jump up when they hear a South African accent. Even the sun, embarrassed, withdraws her warmth from this atrocious defiance and unbridled denial of the ties that should bind us here and always. And the night will not own any of the stench of betrayal which has desecrated our national anthem. So, do not tell me of NEPAD or AU. Do not tell me of SADC. And please do not try to say shit about Ubuntu or any other such neurosis of history. Again I say, while I still have voice, remember, always remember that you are what you do, past any saying of it. Our memories of struggle refuse to be erased. Our memories of struggle refuse to die. My mothers, fathers of my father and me, how shall I sing to celebrate life when every space in my heart is surrounded by corpses? Whose 1,000 thundering voices shall I borrow to shout once more, Da es kak en die land? The last poem I'll read is very short, it's called Letter from Havana for Baby K. It's dedicated to my wife. A while back, I said, with my little hand upon the tapestry of memory and my loin, leaning on the blues to find voice, if loving you is wrong, I do not want to do right. Now, though I do not possess 1,000 thundering voices like Mazisi, Kamtabule, Wekunene, nor Chris Abani's mischievous courage, as I trace the shape of desire and longing, I wish I was a cartographer of dreams. But what I end up with is the stubborn question, should I love my heart more? Because every time I miss you, that is where I find you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, a little bit, yes. Wonderful audience, and we'll have questions and comments.
Neruda and Gwendolyn Brooks had an effect on your poetry, am I correct?
Yes.
Could you talk about how, or in any kind of way you would like to answer it?
I'm not too sure if I can, but I could share a little anecdote. I used to, well, maybe I still do, after maybe 5 years or so, that I would take a selection of my work over that period and try to study it like an outsider to see if there have been any developments, if I've learned anything, if I'm doing, okay, anything worth noting. And then one time, after I had been through that exercise, I was in Chicago at the late Gwen Brooks's place. And I told her I was surprised to find out how much Gwen Brooks there was in my work. I had not been conscious. So initially, she thought I was just being nice. But then I explained what I had been doing. And with her worldwide heart, almost bashful like a little girl, she just said something like, "Oh, if it is like that, I'm so flattered." Neruda, I don't know. It was probably at both the artistic and the philosophical and political level. And that, all I can say was finally, when we met and I was still young, and he found out how much I'd read of him and what I thought of his work, tears started streaming down his face, and all he could say was, the party must be doing something we don't know. I mean, the Communist Party in South Africa must be doing something we don't know. You know, if a young South African like that has been exposed to Neruda like that.
And of course, there's the Gwendolyn Brooks Prize for Poetry that was received with great honor. Other questions?
Sir, could you make a comment about the late South African poet Dennis Brutus? You read a poem that included his name, and Dennis was my mentor for 22 years, and his loss was profound for me. But could you make a comment about your association with Dennis in South Africa?
Yeah. Dennis was unquestionably a fighter. Although like with all the contradictions that some of us have, he was more of a soloist than a movement person, which I always thought was regrettable. If I give an illustration of that, for instance, after the success to have the World Olympic Committee cut ties with South Africa and kick it out of the Olympics, Dennis could claim things like, it's nobody else but me, it's this fist, nobody else's, that kicked South Africa out of the Olympics, things like that. It was in a sense unfortunate that someone with his level of courage and determination to fight would have that very strong little anarchist streak to want to work alone. That's all I can say. But I respect that him.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Right.
Thank you so much, probably, for your reading today and for being here. I have two questions. One is very small sort of curiosity. In Noah's Serenity here, can you tell us who Nathalie is? And then the other one is a serious question, which is that I am so struck by the way that your voice has always been a voice of conscience and often a voice from the outside of conscience. And I'm wondering what it meant to you, I mean, as part of a community and of a movement, but still a voice speaking truth to power. And now as the poet laureate, you're both inside and outside of that. And I wonder how you've balanced that so clearly in speaking about things like violence towards Makwerekwere and others.
Okay. Well, the first one, which is easy to answer, Nathalie, I forget their last name, but Nathalie is a very young, very fantastic Palestinian poet. She lives in this country also. And then the insider, outsider, poet laureate, maybe I should answer that by going back to pre-colonial days, because this is not poet laureate like at the White House or Buckingham Palace or stuff like that. It comes more from a tradition where, because if you were a poet that gained respect because you could create with a product of a people's collective genius, which is language, it put you above even the highest authority in the land. So that, for instance, even in the 19th century, when Shaka was trying to establish his empire, Magolwane, the court poet, was the only man in Zulu society that could say anything, even about Shaka, without fear of anything. Okay. So the position I occupy is more like that. Okay.
I'm just trying to come down from having listened to the cadence of your reading reminded me very much of Dennis Brutus, and with Vermont here, Dennis was oftentimes here in Philadelphia reading. My question kind of is, we have a poet laureate here in Philadelphia, and she is Sonia Sanchez, who was part of the 70s Black arts movement in New York, and she has a very powerful voice. And you've referenced not just Dennis Brutus and Gwendolyn Brooks, but Langston Hughes. I'm seeing, and of course, Amiri Baraka. I'm seeing that there is that people of color tend to have that voice. Maybe it is the oppression, maybe it is whatever, but I'm just wondering where your perspective on a world kind of worldwide range comes on with that people of color can be the voice of the poet.
Okay, I'm not too sure if I understand the question correctly. How people of color could be that voice of the world, meaning like at the level of conscience. Is that correct?
I suppose just at the level of responding to,
Or to be articulate?
right, to articulate the big picture.
Okay. I think when, even if you wrote a book several thousand pages long, that in the final analysis, what it boils down to, if you have been articulate enough, is this is who I am. You cut out all that other mess, you are all the time saying, this is who I am. If you've done it successfully enough, what is human about that hopefully will touch what is human in another person, and they would be moved perhaps to understand themselves better and where they are better and how they relate to other people and the rest of the world. I don't think it can be much more than that. Otherwise, what it means is, instead of people getting into, let's say, a poem or poetry generally, into it, and then coming out of it to find what it connects with. What they do is bring in whatever excess garbage from outside and impose it on the text, which I think is unfair. I think, for instance, if you look at every word the poet uses, as something like throwing a pebble into a body of water, that if it is done skillfully enough, each single pebble starts creating concentric circles, right? Until at some point they are so joined together you could no longer tell where one started, where one began to. And life moves like that. And that's what the poet would do. In other words, affirm life as creative activity.
And there's another piece to this that would be really
Thank you very much.
Keorapetse will be reading with Sonia Sanchez up at Amherst in the next.
Oh, we've done it.
Oh, you've done it already? Oh, okay. Last week, sorry. Well, you've missed the opportunity, but perhaps it's stayed. Okay, so friendships across lines there with Sonia. Final.
Thank you very much for coming to read your poems to us. As I was listening to you, I realized that as an African child, that you represent our fathers and our grandfathers, and people who fought for the independence of Africa. And when you were reading the point about xenophobia, I realized that there is a gap between the children, people my age, and people who fought for independence. And we don't really realize what you went through. And I was just wondering what you think should be happening in Africa, because you talked about SADC and the African Union, and I just want to know what you hope to see in us, and
Okay. I'm trying to, if you looked around here in this country, for instance, you would realize that, and it's nothing new, that there are all kinds of hustlers who will get a hold of anything, and including a slogan, and distort it to serve their own individual little perverse, selfish purposes. Here I'm trying to say, if bodies we have created, like SADC, like the African Union, concepts like Ubuntu, you know, I am a human being only because you are there to affirm it. Okay. That people take those things and use them for their selfish little perverse interest. So that what the poem, if it is a poem, what the piece is trying to say is that until we stop doing that, then don't even mention. If you come to me as a hustler, don't talk about those things. Let's use them to benefit us, not to benefit the little selfish individual hustlers. Does that somewhat answer your?
No, that
Okay.
We'll let that be the last of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. This has been a memorable occasion.